Hello and welcome to WGTC Radio, the official podcast of entertainment website We Got This Covered. I'm Jonathan Lack.
And I'm Sean Chapman.
And we're here to talk about Doctor Who! Woohoo! We're back!
Finally! It's been too long since we were able to talk about Doctor Who on the podcast.
Oh my god, if you have been listening to Sean and I on our various podcast endeavors for any length of time, you know that we really like to talk about Doctor Who. In April, on the old monthly 10 podcast, which we hosted before WGTC Radio, this was April of 2011, in preparation of Series 6, or Season 32?
Yes.
Yes. We had three-hour podcasts going through the entire history of Doctor Who, and that was only touching on one serial per Doctor, so we talk about this a lot. And then we did one about the Season 6 premiere, and the finale, and the whole season as a whole. I think we did a mid-season finale one. We did one about all the different Christmas specials. It was nuts.
Every time we talk about Doctor Who, it just goes nuts.
Yes. But on WGTC Radio, we've sort of been holding back so far, and I think part of that was that we had a lot of other stuff to talk about recently, but I think it was also that we felt we needed to take a break, recharge those Doctor Who batteries, and then come back full fucking force.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So, we're going to be talking about Doctor Who a lot from now on. And in this podcast, we will be previewing Season 7 of Doctor Who, or Season 33 overall in the general canon. And we're going to just preview the season, talk about our hopes and dreams and predictions for what might happen and what we want to see happen, and we're a little, about our feelings of past seasons of the show and stuff, just to give you some context. So this will be just sort of a celebration and a primer getting you ready for Season 7 of Doctor Who, which returns to BBC One and BBC America on September 1st, which is a Saturday, and will run for 5 episodes before going off until the Christmas special. It's a whole thing. We'll talk about that. But, and then also, on later episodes of the podcast, we will be reviewing Doctor Who each and every week. We'll probably hold the discussions until the end of the podcast, just in case you're not interested, in which case we really don't understand you as a human being.
Yeah, if you're not interested in Doctor Who, you really need to make the effort, because Doctor Who just enriches you.
It does. And it's also, it's one of those shows that's, I think, has this weird perception as being niche. And it's broad to me. It's like, that's one of the things that's wonderful about it, is it's broad without sacrificing its creative integrity. Anyone can enjoy Doctor Who.
Yeah, and it's got such a perfect premise for a TV show, with the TARDIS being able to go anywhere in time and space, where you can tell any story in a Doctor Who episode. So it's like, even if you have that friend that's not really into sci-fi stuff, there's got to be some Doctor Who episodes that they would love.
Yes.
You've got Western Doctor Who episodes. You've got disaster movie Doctor Who episodes. You've got horror Doctor Who episodes, just like straight sci-fi. You've got everything.
You've got pirate ship ones.
Yes, you've got space pirate ship ones.
You've got ones where little girls' drawings come to life.
You've got ones where mannequins come to life and attack people.
Yep. And Daleks.
And lots of Daleks.
Lots and lots of Daleks. Anyway, and we should say, while I myself am a Doctor Who aficionado, I would say, Sean is actually an expert, and probably one of the world's foremost experts on Doctor Who.
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily worlds, because there are a lot of us out there, but I think probably in the general area we're in, I've probably experienced more Doctor Who fiction than anyone within a good maybe 50-mile radius.
Yes. Sean has not only seen every existing episode of Doctor Who and listened to several that no longer exist, he's also listened to radio dramas and read books and all sorts of
I've read
stuff.
Several comic books. Yes. Doctor Who comic books are actually pretty good. It's surprising. There are some surprisingly good Doctor Who comic books out there that I didn't really expect when I got into that area of the fiction.
Yep. But anyway, we'll be talking about Doctor Who a lot. We'll be reviewing each episode, having sort of a discussion on it. I don't know if it'll be as much of a review, because we generally Doctor Who has a generally consistent quality.
Yeah.
So we'll just be discussing it and talking about where the season's going. We definitely realized last year when Season 6 ended and we did this 3-hour podcast recapping the whole season, talking about each episode was so fun, we really should have given more time to each one, we thought.
Yeah, because in general, a Doctor Who episode has a lot of stuff that goes on, and there's a lot of stuff you can talk about.
Yep, and especially this season with the direction they look to be going in. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Before we get started with Doctor Who, Sean, on the day we're recording this was our first day back at college for this year.
Yes.
Yes. So, how was your day?
Oh, my day was pretty good. I mean, it's just kind of starting with classes, but I think I told you about my I'm taking Calculus 2, and my Calculus 2 teacher, I've only had one class, but so far he seems to be completely incompetent and not able to perform his duty as a teacher.
Tell the story.
I don't know how much I want to get into it, but basically it's just one of those things where I'm an English student, and that's like where my interest lies in sort of like narrative fiction and stuff. That's why that's the kind of stuff we talk about on this podcast. But I also have an invested interest in science, and I like to be informed about that kind of stuff. So last year I took a calculus class, and my teacher in that calculus class was like the best teacher I've ever had for any class ever. I mean, he was the guy where he was one of the software leads on the Hubble Space Telescope. Like, the dude knew his calculus, and he really understood how to teach people. So it was a really great experience taking that calculus class, and I'm not someone who's... I mean, I'm good at math, but it's not like... I'm not so good at math that it's like I can just do it. Like, it's a class that I have to put a lot of effort into to be able to, like, keep up with the class, because I'm not intuitive with math at all. That's easily my worst subject. So, but I had a really good experience with that calculus class, and then I also wanted to take a calculus-based physics class, because if you're not taking calculus-based physics, you're basically not taking physics, because that's why calculus exists. So, but I have to take Calculus 2 for that class, so I decided to enroll in Calculus 2 this year, hoping I would get a similar experience, but the experience was not great. First of all, the calculus class that I had this year was in a building that on the Boulder campus, on our Boulder campus, it's kind of infamous. It's the engineering complex. It's this big sort of like square building that has about 3 levels, and it's a complete labyrinth. And it was completely ridiculous where my class was in a room 1B55, and I went to 1B55, about half of the class went to 1B55, realized that we were at the wrong 1B55, that there exists in the same building, I want to stress this point, it's the same building, there are 2 rooms labeled 1B55, and we went to the wrong one. So, that alone was kind of like a bad first experience with the class, being like a few minutes late because half the class went to the wrong 1B55, which I think it's a fair mistake to make, going to the room 1B55 and just kind of waiting, hoping you're at the right place.
Yep.
But then once I actually made it into the room, the teacher was a guy who he basically spent the entire class, all he did was do problems. He just wrote up problems on a chalkboard, and it's like he just like paid no attention to the class. He mumbled to himself basically like the steps he was following. I mean, he said basically, okay, we're doing antiderivatives, and then he just like, this is the very first day of class, it's just like, got the rubric, it's like, okay, we're doing antiderivatives, and he just starts running through example problems. It's like, listen, dude, it's like, you need to stop, first of all, it's like, this is the first day of class, you need to introduce yourself to the class, you need to kind of like, be personable, you need to introduce some of like, elements of who you are, it's like, and maybe like, it's like get a bit of rapport with the class. So it's like, and they understand, how you experience math, like why you like math, like your sort of history with math, sort of like the basic things that teachers should do. None of the things. He did none of them. He just started doing problems and hoped that you understand my specific way of understanding math. It's like, it's basically trying to learn math from like some other kid in the class who has no experience teaching whatsoever. So, Not absolutely thrilling. It's basically like having, like I was like, it's like I have a textbook, and then I also have this like audio only textbook that's really hard to pause and rewind because you have to raise your hand and get him to back up. It's like he's no more useful than a textbook.
Well, I had a really interesting experience today. Maybe I'll share one or two. So I am taking as an elective, because you have to do all this elective credit at CU Boulder. And so I'm doing a beginning Japanese class, because I've always wanted to learn Japanese, and I thought this is the time to do it. And so I'm taking it, and it's a daily class, and I've been really excited for it. So I get to class, and the teacher comes in and introduces herself. She's a native of Japan and speaks Japanese fluently and doesn't speak English as fluently, but I always actually kind of like that in foreign language instruction, really having a native speaker who understands the language intuitively. But, so she hands out the rubric, and then she's off, and it's like a fucking marathon for the next 50 minutes, because she races through the syllabus like a mile an hour, and I'm like, not in a bad way, she's really hitting it, she's not wasting any time at all, and then she's like, all right, let's do some teaching, and she proceeds to teach us all of the greetings in Japanese, and there's situations you would use them in. Maybe not everyone that's ever existed, obviously, but many of them. And so we're going through, we're repeating, we're writing them down. She's like, every time we learn a new one, she goes back to the beginning and we're doing them. I think we had 20 greetings and situations like that in total. We learn all of those, and I'm like, she's going to let us out now, isn't it, Sheiks? Because it's the first day of class. But then I check my watch, and we're only 20 minutes in. I'm like, oh, God, what are we doing now? And then she's like, now we're going to learn the Japanese counting system. And she goes through the entire Japanese counting system, which is incredibly simple, because it's just like you have your numbers, ichi, ni, san, shi, and then you have, basically for the tens, you just have ju, which is 10, and then ju ichi for 11, ju ni for 12, it's really easy, and then for, like, your 20s, it's like, ni ju, then the number after that. So it's like a really simple counting system.
Yeah, it's just sort of like a basic numeral system. Yeah.
Right. And we went through that entire thing and learned it, and we're, like, memorizing it and stuff. And then we still weren't done. And this is all in one 50-minute class, I should stress. Then she's like, all right, now we're going to start learning hiragana. And hiragana is the first of 2 Japanese syllabaries, each of which has 48 characters. And we learn all the vowels in hiragana. And I was like, I could follow all this because I've done some, like, Japanese learning on my own. I've studied it a little bit. I've learned the hiragana before. So I was having a really fun time with all this because I usually feel like most classes move too slowly for me. I wish we did more. I wish they moved faster. So this was really fun, but I could tell, like, kids around me who maybe had walked in because this is beginning Japanese, and they maybe didn't know about the 3 different Japanese alphabetical systems.
Yeah, it's like the one person who's just been kind of interested in learning Japanese and has had no real, like, exposure to it at all. Right. Just comes in off the street and is left by the wayside.
I mean, she didn't even explain Japanese pronunciation, which is very simple, but you still need it taught to you.
Yeah, because you're just going to pronounce it the way you would expect to pronounce it as an English speaker, unless you know how you're supposed to pronounce it as a Japanese speaker.
Right, and I mean, the first thing we did was a speaking exercise, all the greetings. She would say, Ohayo, and we'd say Ohayo, or Ohayo gozaimasu, and Ohayo gozaimasu, but, a lot of the kids I could tell kept putting the U on gozaimasu, because it's spelled gozaimasu, but in most dialects of Japanese, you leave the u off, or you just sort of...
Yeah, you just sort of kind of almost imply it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, she didn't stop to explain that. So it was really funny. I think it was a really good class, and I'm excited to learn more. It was basically, I was talking to Sean, we both did Spanish at our shitty high school.
No, the high school was fine.
The high school was fine.
Classes were
atrocious. Yeah. And I said to Sean when I got back, and he immediately understood what I meant. I learned more Japanese in one 50-minute Japanese class at CU than I learned Spanish in 3 years at Golden High.
It's like, I learned more Italian playing Assassin's Creed 2 than I learned Spanish in 3 years at the Spanish class in high school.
I mean, God, we did the counting system in 10 minutes today. We spent 2 weeks on numbers once, not in Spanish 1, in Spanish 3.
I mean, it's just a basic numeral system.
I know.
I'm with you. I think language classes are weirdly slow in some areas, and then, like, sometimes they just, like, speed through something that's drastically important to understanding the language.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm having fun with the Japanese class. The textbook's cool because, it's got their characters all over it, and that makes it look really... I'm sure to a Japanese person, it looks like a book, but it's like, ooh, this is exciting. I have a book with all these cool, like, calligraphy characters on it. And, yeah. Anyway. So... that's cool. I, went to the CU bookstore and got my dramatically overpriced books. I ultimately left one out of my cart because I have to tell the story and badmouth CU for a moment publicly because they deserve to be badmouthed for this. For my environmental chemistry class, they're making us buy a book CU themselves apparently have printed and you can't get anywhere else, and it's required. Like, you have to buy this chemistry book. And it's $100 and they have no used or rental copies of it. And it's like a 250-page book, and they're charging $100 for it. And this is like one of the single biggest classes that CU offers in science because it's a chemistry 1000 or something.
Yeah, it's just like one of like the basic classes that you have to take.
Yes. Yeah. So they're basically extorting everyone who's taking that class and making them buy their version of the book that's dramatically overpriced. And I did not buy it, and I've never actually needed any of the science textbooks I've had to buy for college because we don't use them. So I'm going to see.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just taking like chemistry 1000, it's like you can use the internet.
Yeah.
You don't really need like a specialized textbook. But in what's really frustrating about my classes with my books is that I have some English classes where I need to. I have to buy, like, the most basic, like text that you would expect for like a college English like literature class, like Paradise Lost, like some Shakespeare books, and then the Canterbury Tales. So it's like, these are books that have been reprinted in like a million different editions. It's like, I could get the Canterbury Tales for like $5 and just like a normal crappy little edition if I wanted to. But no, they decide that we have a very specific edition that you need to buy because we are going to do, you're going to have to read the introduction. Like the introductory essay that only exists in this edition. This like, okay, now I have to buy like a $50 edition of a book that it's like, I don't even technically need to buy this book. I could get this off the internet if I wanted to.
Yeah.
This is for free. Like, I could download it as an iBook for free if I wanted to on my iPhone. It's like, nope, you have to buy the $50 edition to read that one introductory essay. So that essay, when I read that better be the best fucking essay I've ever read in my entire life that's worth $50.
Well, that'll be the subject of our next podcast.
Yeah. That's one thing that pisses me off, where it's just like, if it's a standard text that a bunch of people own and has been reprinted, that's like, it's a text that's like 600 years old, you don't need to buy a specific edition of that text. It's like, anyone can have that text as long as the text itself is the exact same. Like any Shakespeare, it's the Shakespeare. It's going to be the same. As long as it's like Middle English version of the Canterbury Tales, it's the same no matter which edition you buy. So it's just like, just keep it, just like say, just bring the Canterbury Tales. We're learning that. Anything special, me the teacher, I will bring that to you. Because it's like, that's just how it needs to work.
Teachers, I think, are also really oddly, like, obsessed with page numbers and like, but the page numbers will be different. And it's like, and?
It's like, I can manage that. You just teach by sections.
Yeah.
It's like, all this, it's like, Canterbury Tales, it's like they're all specific stories. It's like all these have like, you've got acts and scenes in Shakespeare. It's like just, there's better ways to divide out a book than just doing page numbers.
All right, well, that's our first day of college, year 2 experience, and maybe we'll have more stories to share with you next week. But for now, we are previewing Doctor Who Series 7. It is returning to BBC America and BBC One in the UK on September 1st at 7 p.m. in the US. I don't know about the UK, like 7:20 their time. They air Doctor Who at weird times, and they do it different every week, as I understand it. Like sometimes they'll be like 6:20, 6:15, 6:40. They'll just move around.
It's just like a game trying to figure out when Doctor Who's on.
And they don't need to worry about that because it's UK and everybody watches Doctor Who, and they will go to any lengths to watch it. It's Doctor friggin' Who. Anyway, so this is Series 7. It's beginning with it's going to be a 14-episode season. They're beginning with 5 episodes, which will be sort of they've confirmed the final arc of the Pond characters, Amy and Rory, Karen Gillan, and Arthur Darvill. And then that's going to lead into sort of a mid-season finale at episode 5, so that'll air through September and a little bit of October. It'll come back in December for the Christmas special, but this year the Christmas special will be a little different because it will just be episode 6 of the run, and we'll introduce the new companion, and then they'll have another half season in January, February of 7 through 14, and as I understand it, they'll probably start Series 8 sometime in 2013 because it's the 50th anniversary year and they want to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yep. So in any case, that's what Series 7 is going to be. We're going to talk about what we want out of it, but first, Sean.
Yes.
I want you to give us the experts' analysis, like, what is Doctor Who?
What is Doctor Who?
How would you sum it up in a phrase or just simply?
Doctor Who is life. Doctor Who it's a show about a crazy old man in a box that can travel anywhere in time and space, and wherever he goes, stuff is messed up. Sometimes he fixes it, and usually he takes people along for the ride. And that's what Doctor Who is. It's just like the most pure adventure fantasy show. Like, I mean, it is sci-fi, but it's not just sci-fi. Like, it's anything it needs to be. Just it's got the most perfect premise for a show ever, and it's pure adventure distilled into, well, depending on when you're watching Doctor Who, into like 30-minute segments or 45-minute segments or 50-minute segments or a pretty terrible 90-minute TV movie. But the Paul McGann 8th Doctor TV movie is subject that could be spread across many podcasts if we wanted to go talk about all the stuff that's wrong, but still kind of weirdly endearing about that movie.
Oh, I know. They released a special edition, 3-disc DVD of it recently. I kind of want to get it just to see what all, the features would be.
I mean, it's like, if you look into the stuff behind that TV movie, that, the story behind the TV movie is Doctor Who proper, the classic show, as the fans call it.
Which began in 1963.
Yeah, it began in 1963, on my birthday, November 23rd.
Really?
Yes. It's just,
that is cosmic.
It's like fate. I had no idea when I was getting into because I've watched I watched some Doctor Who when I was younger, not even realizing what Doctor Who was, and then I got really into it a couple of years ago when I watched everything I possibly could, and so then I found out that yes, it aired on my birthday in 1963, which is just really strange.
So you were destined for Doctor Who.
Yeah. So it's the classic series ran from 1963 up till 1989, where it was canceled with the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. And then, it was 6 years later, in 1995, they made the Paul McGann 8th Doctor TV movie for American audiences to try to revive the show. It was from Fox, and it was kind of weird that they wanted to revive the show, but they still wanted it to be in continuity with the classic series, so they had Sylvester McCoy reprise the role as the 7th Doctor for about the first 10 minutes until he got the most
the worst death.
The worst. Oh, okay, not as bad as Colin Baker turning into Sylvester McCoy. They had a sort of a few run of bad deaths and regenerations for the Doctor, but yeah, an unceremonious demise of the 7th Doctor, and then regeneration to the 8th Doctor, Paul McGann, and they just the story behind all the stuff that's because it was going to be started. It was a TV movie, and they were also hoping it would work as sort of a pilot, so that a new show could be made that it would be for American audiences and sort of revive the show. And they had a lot of really insane ideas. I've looked at some concept art they had for their version of the Daleks are going to be these spider Dalek things. It's just they had all these really wacky ideas. In the TV movie, the Doctor says he's half human on his mother's side.
Yeah,
it's totally fucking bullshit. It just got immediately ignored by every single Doctor Who fan ever as soon as he said that, for good reason.
Yes. And I have always loved the canonical explanation of that, which is that in his post-regeneration high, he wasn't making sense.
I mean, that's one of the great things about Doctor Who fans, is that a lot of us find it hard to let go of the fact that a show that has been running, that started in 1963 and is still going now, has every now and then a few continuity errors.
Yes.
And just the bizarre explanations for how all the continuity stuff fits. There are literally 3 different Doctor Who episodes that explain how the Loch Ness Monster, why the Loch Ness Monster is there, and why it's this big myth. That's there are 3 different explanations.
Parallel universes.
Yeah, it's just that's one of the great things about Doctor Who fandoms, is since it's just been going on for so long, there are so many different ways you can just kind of approach the series, and so many different perspectives you can have, especially once they revived the show proper after the TV movie just failed in every respect and just kind of went away, and then they revived the show proper in 2005. And
yeah, so the TV series, the TV movie didn't work, but then Russell T Davies comes along in 2005, and he has a great idea for how to do it, which is just do the show.
Yeah, he basically just does the show, and then he had the great idea of the Time War, which just really kind of just changed the playing field for because the Doctor's race, the Time Lords, are gone now because of this giant Time War that happened in the interim period, and so fans of the show can come back to this new version of the show and still have sort of this similar perspective of new people coming to the show. There's no background of Doctor Who at all, and this sort of uncertain history of what happened in this Time War and what is the status quo in this new version. I mean, it's the same continuity, but it's sort of this new interpretation of the Doctor Who universe.
I would compare it a little bit, if you're unfamiliar with the concept, to the 2009 J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie. Now, that obviously completely redid the continuity, but it was a similar idea where you're in the same universe, but you find a way where you can bring in old fans and new fans because you're doing such a thing where you can have your own kind of continuing continuity.
Yeah, and it's and have this new aspect of mystery where it's while the new fans have, this is one of the things that I think is so interesting about the new show, is that the old school fans of Doctor Who come into the new version of the show and watch it from the perspective of the Doctor, because that is the character they know the best, whereas people who start with the revived series will look at it from the perspective of Rose, the companion character, because she's the audience proxy. And if you're completely new to the show, you need that audience proxy because you're not going to know what the TARDIS is. Like you don't understand what's going on with all of that.
And we can. That's what's great about Sean and I is we can attest to that. Is that I've watched a lot of the classic series since. I started with Christopher Eccleston, season 1, 2005, and watched from there. And Sean started with William Hartnell, episode 1.
I started with Patrick Troughton, Tomb of the Cybermen, when I was 10 years old. Yeah, but technically,
in a general sense, And so we have had these discussions, and that definitely bears out. Where I remember it was really cool to have an audience proxy there because that to me, that didn't just help make the universe clearer; it made the Doctor himself kind of cooler.
Yeah, because you always need that companion character, that audience proxy, no matter what. I mean, even if you've watched a bunch of Doctor Who, it's the Doctor just doesn't quite work on his own. He needs to have someone there to explain what's going on to.
Yes. And, Russell T Davies gets a lot of shit, sometimes deservedly so, for rougher eras in his run. He was prone to certain writing tics that Sean and I, for instance, really didn't like these sort of overblown finales.
Yeah, and the
romantic thing.
Really sort of weird soap opera romance stuff, which is just really strange from an old school Doctor Who fan perspective, having the Doctor be really romantically interested in a companion character, and who one does not. I mean, I hate Rose in
season 2.
In season 2, but it's Rose is by no means the most interesting or the most deserved Doctor Who companion to have having a romance with the Doctor.
Yeah, but anyway, what we're saying here is, Russell T Davies had his rough spots, but you have to credit him infinitely for bringing the show back so successfully. Yeah. But that run, that first series, is fantastic, and I think it's his best stretch of the show.
Yeah, I completely agree.
By far, and it's because, again, he not only does he bring the show back successfully, he introduces the Time War, he introduces who at the time was a great new companion. Mm-hmm. Rose is really good in season 1. And just that whole series, reintroducing the Doctor's mythology while also continuing character arcs from the old series and sort of thematic things carrying over is just a brilliant transition. And I don't think you could ask for a better kickoff to a new run of Doctor Who than that first series.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's amazing to me, looking at it and seeing just how they were able to bring back a show that had been off the air for a really long time. Like I said, the Doctor Who itself ended in 1989, and the only new stuff that they made for Doctor Who were novels, audio dramas, the 1995 TV movie that nobody really knew about, unless you were a hardcore Doctor Who fan. Who's going to listen to the audio drama?
And this is pre-internet, so maybe you don't even know about all that if you're in America or something.
Yeah. I mean, you can watch old Doctor Who episodes on PBS.
But that they would probably only be Tom Baker at that point. I mean,
yeah, mostly, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Russell T Davies ran the show across 2 Doctors, Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant. And David Tennant was there for 3 years. 3 years and a couple of specials, and then Christopher Eccleston was just the 1 year at the beginning.
I think of David Tennant as 4 years.
Yeah,
because. Even though it's not 4 seasons, it was 4 years.
It felt like that when it was airing. So, and Russell T Davies left along with David Tennant at the end of their run. And one of the actually cool things about the end of their run is that Davies did tie off a lot of his thematic arcs from that era. And I really love how the 10th Doctor goes out in a way that doesn't erase the Time War from the continuity or anything, but it does sort of bring him to an emotional close on the issue, where he can, in the future, be not as tortured by it.
Yeah, which had really kind of dragged down the show at that point, where it's
Probably.
It was really, really obsessed over the melodrama of the Time War and the Doctor being the last of the Time Lords and all that stuff.
But anyway, David Tennant and Russell T Davies leaving on such a good note left the door open for Stephen Moffat, who had sort of made a name for himself writing 1 episode a year for Doctor Who at that point, and it was usually the best episode of those respective seasons. And he comes in to run the new show, hires 26-year-old Matt Smith as the new Doctor, who was the youngest Doctor in Doctor Who history, and they sort of have a fresh start, but it's very much still in that same continuity. Obviously, It's just that this was obviously a clear, hard start in terms of a new artistic mind behind the show.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing that's sort of core behind the what makes Doctor Who a really good show and why it's still going on today. Is that it's got that framework of being able to reinvent and change itself every few years. A Doctor Who goes through a lot of different phases where in a lot of different styles. I mean, even the Doctor himself, obviously, the whole conceit of the character being able to regenerate and like a new actor being able to take on the role but maintaining the same continuity is so genius.
Yeah.
Like I know like when they came up with the idea with William Hartnell, it's like nobody was thinking about the fact that it's like, see, we're going to have 11 people playing the Doctor.
Yeah.
They're just thinking, okay, this show's still pretty good and it's still successful right now, but William Hartnell can't still be on the role.
Yeah.
So it's like we have to come up with something. So they came up with the regeneration idea.
And maybe one day we'll talk again about some of the older Doctors, but you have to give Patrick Troughton, who is Sean's favorite Doctor and one of my favorites, and one of the fan favorites overall, massive credit for, as an actor, establishing the idea that the Doctor could have multiple incarnations and making that believable.
Yeah, like having a different incarnation of the Doctor, but it's like you can still recognize it's the same character, but he's got this sort of new personality or this new aspect of his personality sort of like shines through in each different incarnation. Is very interesting.
And speaking of incarnations, so we're talking about Series 5 now, Season 31 overall, and Matt Smith comes in, Stephen Moffat's writing the show, and where to even start on all this? First off, Matt Smith, Sean and I agree, easily the best Doctor of the modern era.
Yeah, of the modern era.
And absolutely one of the best overall in the top 3.
I mean, I know we're by saying that we're pissing off a lot of David Tennant fangirls, but
I know. Well, it's just, and I will admit, Matt Smith does have a leg up in the writing. I do think it's very clear Stephen Moffat writes the Doctor better than Russell T Davies did.
Yeah, I agree.
But even that being said, I love not just Matt Smith's look, which just screams alien to me in a way David Tennant doesn't, but his interpretation is so nuanced on every level. I mean, honestly, if you're going to talk about what Matt Smith does in this role, you would have to devote a podcast to it. It's incredible. And I've said, I watch a lot of TV, I review a lot of TV professionally, and Matt Smith has been giving since 2010, or no, this was 2011. Yeah. When this all 2010.
2010 was when Series 5 would
aired. Since 2010, he's been giving, I think, the best performance on TV. And I think while there are many other fantastic performances right now, Bryan Cranston, John Hamm, it's just Matt Smith's, what he's doing is superior, and it's incredible. And I think, we talk about Patrick Troughton, it goes back to a lot of what he was doing and revolutionizing at the time, of just taking a character who could be sort of stuffy and British and sort of just dull. And the Doctor's never really been dull, I'm not saying that, but there's something the Doctor can fall into that, I think, if you did him wrong, because a lot of British characters can, but just fight.
I've never seen the Doctor done wrong, so I can't. Yeah. I don't know if the Doctor ever could be dull. You'd have to make a pretty grave error in judgment for that to happen.
I guess what I'm just trying to say is make someone who's so alien and then still so relatable. I think that's something that he's doing, fantastically. So that kind of got away from me.
Yeah, I'm confused. I don't know what you were saying.
I love all the Doctors that I've seen. So in any case, Colin Baker, I didn't really understand, but
well, I mean that's not his it's like that's another series of 10 podcasts talking about all the crap that went on the Colin Baker era. I mean that's the subject of many a documentary and essay and angry fan letter online.
Yes. But anyway, so the 5th series, Matt Smith's debut. Another thing Sean and I agree upon. We agree. This is the best run of Modern Who. So far, is this 5th series, and it's one of the best overall, probably just as a creative period for the show.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the only other eras that kind of rival it are the last season of Patrick Troughton, where luckily that's basically the only really remaining full season of Patrick Troughton. Mostly is his last season, but they're all really, really good. And then I would say there's a few eras of Tom Baker, like Tom Baker's first era. John Pertwee's last season's also really fantastic. There are a few that are at the same level. But there is. I think season 5 of Modern Who is the only Modern Who that kind of reaches that peak where it's it's so consistently good all the time.
I mean, every episode, these 13, I've said this many times, and Sean has too, these 13 are just a perfect season. Not every episode is a masterpiece, but they're all really, really good, and there are several masterpieces.
Yeah.
The 11th Hour is as good a Doctor introduction as there's ever been.
I think the 11th Hour is the best Doctor introduction episode I think there's been on the show. There's no... You can't possibly do it better than that,
I know, it's so perfect. I mean, you have not only an introduction to the Doctor, but to his new companion, to her boyfriend, to the new kind of status quo you have with the Doctor.
Yeah, the sort of new style of the show.
A new TARDIS, and you have a contained one episode story.
Yeah.
That's setting up an arc for 13 episodes.
And a new sonic screwdriver.
Oh, yeah.
You can't forget about that.
That's a good sonic screwdriver, too. Anyway, and this whole season, though, it's just... It's the only season of Doctor Who I've seen that really masters the idea that you can have great standalone Doctor Who adventures and a story arc that's so compelling, and by the end of the 13 episodes feels like you've seen the most epic thing you've ever witnessed. You know?
Yeah. It definitely was able to sort of balance that act of being able to deliver sort of the Monster of the Week episodes and then like just sewing in the few little details and all of those that they all feel connected. But they're able to, but it doesn't distract from the main plot line.
Right. And I think the key here was Stephen Moffat had such a strong handle on the characters that even if an episode had no major narrative relations to the plot of the season, the characters always moved forward from where they were the week before. And that really helps it, to me, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, you can't... We're neglecting to mention how crucial, because we're going to have to talk about it later on this podcast, Karen Gillan was to this season. And to the next season, obviously. She's just one of the great companions. And Rory, who comes in middle of the season, is too. And
yes, Rory is among the pantheon of the greatest companions to me. I love Rory.
Yeah.
Especially like just how he develops is so interesting because
everybody loves Rory.
He didn't even really like at the beginning of the season. I mean, he was introduced in the first episode, but he didn't really become a companion until like the very end of that season. Really.
Right. And I think it was just because Arthur Darvill kind of forced his way in. Like you see him, and he's like, we got to write more for this kid, and then we got to write more, and then fuck it, he's in the opening credits.
Yeah, it's just like all of a sudden it's just like he just kind of became a companion out of nowhere because he was so awesome.
Yep, and I think we should talk about that. In many ways, what Stephen Moffat does with Amy and the Doctor is sort of a deconstruction of a lot of classic Doctor, young feminine companion relationships, and a really great one and insightful and just a wonderful relationship. But with Rory, it's something we really haven't seen much of, which is the guy who. He likes the Doctor a lot. He's his friend, but he doesn't have that same deification for him.
Yeah,
he will call the Doctor on his shit. And
it's like what's one of the things really interesting about Rory is that he's a companion that's there, but he's not there for the Doctor.
Right.
He's there for Amy.
Yeah.
Like he and the Doctor are friends, but if Amy was not on the TARDIS, Rory would not be on the TARDIS.
Yeah, because the Doctor is fucking crazy.
Yeah, no, seriously, and Rory really understands that.
Yeah. And he's paid his dues. He's died like 8 times.
We should really count how many times Rory has actually died on the show because it got a little bit ridiculous at some point.
Yeah. There were people theorizing in Series 6 in the middle of it, like, he's actually dead because he keeps dying, like he's a ghost or something.
I love that's another thing that's great about Doctor Who. All the like batshit insane fan theories that people come up with, and they're like just like the best ones are the ones where people are so convinced that they're right. And he's just like, I'm sorry, man. Especially the best ones are the classic Doctor Who fans that just like, where there'll be like one reference to something and they'll be convinced that some like obscure, like Morbius from the Brain of Morbius episode in the Tom Baker era is going to be the next big villain. It's just like, come on, man. It's like, you're just really reaching at this point.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that was Series 5. Now we're up to Series 6, which this was the first one in the modern era that was split in 2. It's 13 episodes again, but they did a 7-episode run in the spring and a 6 in the fall, but it was all one season, one story. And Sean and I, again, I think we come down on all of these issues pretty identically. Series 6 is a really, really good season of television with some incredible highs. As a cohesive whole, it is less than the first Stephen Moffat season.
Yeah, it's definitely inferior to the 5th series. I think it's still probably better than any of the Russell T Davies seasons.
Yes.
Maybe, like, I'm really fond of the first season. I'd probably say the 6th season is a little bit better than that.
Well, because the first season still has growing pains in there.
Yeah.
As good as it is, it's still got, like, I really like the Charles Dickens episode, but you can tell they have issues like, how exactly are we implementing Rose here?
Yeah.
What exactly is the Doctor's going to act like here? Like, it's just, it's not a bad thing. It was episode 2 you can forgive, or I guess that was 3. But, yeah. I mean, 2 also, End of the World. There's just things where they were feeling their way out, and they didn't...
Like when the Doctor causes, Cassandra to explode?
Yes.
That part was a little...
Where he goes, like,
that was a little
ape shit
shocking.
for a minute? Yeah. Anyway, so... Yeah, so Series 6, it's a really good season of television, and actually, we should talk about this for a moment. The highs of that season are probably higher than anything else in Modern Who. Specifically, The Doctor's Wife.
Yeah, The Doctor's Wife is one of the best episodes of Doctor Who there are, at least in my opinion.
Yes.
It's just, I mean, part of that is I'm also a huge, because that's the episode that Neil Gaiman wrote, and I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan. Like, The Sandman is one of, if not my favorite comic book series ever.
But you don't need to know a thing about Neil Gaiman to love that episode. He just gets Doctor Who on an intuitive level. It's like, he comes in and you can tell he's loved this series forever, and he just wants to write the greatest love letter to what Doctor Who means.
Yeah.
And you will always like to say, Sean, that The Doctor's Wife is such a good story that you could see any actor playing the part.
That's what makes Neil Gaiman so good at writing the Doctor, because he's also a huge Doctor Who fan, and I love his favorite Doctor is also Patrick Troughton, and I think you can really see that in this episode. But yeah, one thing that he does to write the Doctor, and it's one thing that makes like a great Doctor Who episode, is when you can see the episode and you can see the Doctor being played by any of the actors that played the Doctor, and they're like, it's definitely like specific lines where it's like you can see, like John Pertwee and Tom Baker and Patrick Troughton and Peter Davison. You can see, like, you just see all of them deliver that line, and they all deliver it in a slightly different way, and it all has like a slightly different context to it. And it's just such a cool phenomenon that it's like only a few episodes of modern Doctor Who kind of get that right, and the Doctor's Wife, it like happens every other scene.
Yeah. And I think part of that is just the story he chooses to tell is one that epitomizes who the Doctor is just as a person,
Yeah, and you really kind of just like delves into like sort of like some pretty deep-seated, I think, like psychological issues he has.
Yes.
Like his attachment to the TARDIS, like speaks so much to the Doctor.
Yeah.
It's such a brilliant, like it's such a kind of almost an obvious concept to do for Doctor Who episode that just was never done before.
I know.
It's like but it could not possibly be done better than that.
No. And, I mean, we're talking about, any Doctor could play it, but you cannot understate the work Matt Smith does in that episode. It's still probably, later in the season he had some amazing material, but, just some of his emotional moments in that episode, like, just hit you in the gut. Like, the way he plays the final scene where he's saying goodbye to the spirit of the TARDIS.
Yeah.
He makes that into, like, Schindler's List level of tragedy.
That's, like, I will say that this is, like, I have never cried at a movie or a TV show or a game or anything. I have teared up once when Optimus Prime died and I saw it on the VHS Transformers movie. I teared up at that. I teared up at the Doctor saying goodbye to Idris.
Yes.
That made me tear up. That was, like, how Matt Smith just delivers those few lines is so incredible to me.
Yes. That is why he is giving the best performance on TV.
Like Optimus Prime dying levels of sad in that episode. I cannot stress that enough. It's like
how have we not reviewed the Transformers movie yet? The 1986 one.
Well, now we know something to do when we're on the down week.
I know. I gotta go get that movie. Anyway,
if we can find a VHS player, I've got it on VHS.
Okay. I've got the DVD at home. I can go grab it. Anyway. So that was Series 6 of Doctor Who. Again, the main problem with Series 6, because it had a lot of great individual episodes and ideas behind it, and I want to say before we go forward anymore, I think it moved the characters of the Doctor, Amy, Rory, and now River, sort of the main four, forward better than the previous season did even. It just really did those arcs spectacularly. It really delved into the Doctor's psyche. It made Amy much darker, and Karen Gillan had fantastic stuff to play.
Yeah.
Again, Arthur Darvill becomes in the pantheon of companions. All of those things. But the overall story Stephen Moffat concocted was amazing at the start, got a little messy in the middle, and then finished kind of weak.
Yeah, that's like...
And part of that was because the non-Moffat scripted episodes, by and large, had nothing to do with the plot of the other ones.
And they would have like one like token scene or line that would try to tie it into the main arc, but it's like you can just see that it's like the Stephen Moffat just like had like threw that in to be able to give this sense that there's an overall storyline, where there is an overall storyline, but it's like these individual stories do not push them along, whereas in Season 5 all of them did.
Yes. And I think and again, when I say that, it's not that I dislike the ideas of story arcs or standalones. If it's Doctor Who, both can work.
Yeah.
But in this season, it sort of made the plot episodes a little troublesome because you would either your memory would be a little hazy by the time you get there, or it's like, why weren't they reacting to this last week? Mm-hmm. Or you would, and then it would make the standalones underwhelming because it's like, why is no one talking about Amy just lost her fucking baby?
Yeah,
it's things like that, and it was just the construction of the season was a little messy, and it had a weak finale.
Yeah.
And the Wedding of River Song, we've done a big rant on it before. It's not a horrible episode by any means. It's got issues, though.
Yeah, it's just like an episode that it really was too complex for its own good, and it really fell apart. And then it's like, and then some of the
resolution.
Yeah, the whole Doctor Who thing is not something that's like that. Well, I'd say it's like, if you haven't watched this, like that, they make this huge deal out of his name being Doctor Who. That's not, just as a Doctor Who fan, that's not the direction I want to see really going in. Like, I don't know, like, how big of a deal it's really going to be, but when you're, like, in the season with a decapitated blue head going, Doctor Who! It's like, it just doesn't make me that excited.
Okay. I mean, there were things that they set up in the ending that I actually really enjoy, like the idea that the Doctor has learned that sometimes he can do more harm than good, being as sort of big as he is and sort of meddling, and that he's going to try to stay more out of the limelight. Now, I think that's a good idea.
I agree.
Going forward, because I think Russell T. Davies, this is one thing Russell T. Davies did not get rid of before Stephen Moffat came in, and that is the sort of deification of the Doctor and making him into this larger, well, he's always been larger than life, but making him into, like, the god of space.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and it gets, I mean, it's almost, in some instances, almost like literally deification.
It is.
Especially like the Titanic episode where he gets lifted up by the two angels. It's just like, that's pretty heavy-handed symbolism there.
And Stephen Moffat, over his 2 seasons, has done a really good job putting the Doctor back down.
Yeah, because that's like, that like sort of the deification of the Doctor was not really present almost at all in the classic series. Like, here and there, every once in a while you'd run into an instance where it's like the Doctor, just like, it's like the Doctor is known in this area. And it kind of makes sense. Like, it's this sort of like almost like fan fiction-y approach to it, I feel, where it's like it's this idea that's like, it's very obvious that it's like, yes, everyone would know about the Doctor if he's been doing this stuff for. Oh, this is like another area where you can get into fan theories. Is how long has the Doctor been alive? But it's like,
but to Russell T. Davies' credit, the Time War is a good explanation for why he would be notorious now.
Yeah,
because that was a universe-wide war through space and time, and the Doctor ended it. He would get some articles written about it.
Yeah, but it's just like, but at a certain point, it's just like it starts kind of just distracting from the stories and the character.
Yeah. And and I'm looking forward to seeing where Moffat goes with a more anonymous Doctor now. And I think there were other very good things that happened in the finale. But should we make fun of one more time just how unsatisfying the resolution to the Doctor dies story it was?
Yeah.
So to recap, Episode 1, the Doctor dies. Stephen Moffat goes to incredible lengths to make it clear this is the Doctor and he is fucking dead.
Yeah, the very first episode.
And it is the most fascinating setup for a season I think you could possibly have. Wonderful. Yeah. And I was on, Sean and I both were like, this is so awesome, we're going to, like, I can't wait to see how this plays out. And all season we were still excited about it, and it seemed like they're really going to do something cool with this.
Yeah.
And then he was in the Tesseract.
Yeah, it was the android.
Yeah.
Doctor. It's like, oh, that's really
stupid.
Yeah, that's really crafty there.
I think that was literally, of all the possible avenues, the least satisfying
I mean,
one.
it was one of those where it's like, it was really obvious, but it was one of those like avenues that they could have taken with the story where it's like, it was so obvious that it felt like there's no it's like when you're watching a Law and Order episode, it's like, this dude's way too guilty to actually be the dude that's guilty.
Yeah.
It's totally the dude that doesn't seem like he's guilty. It felt like it was that, but then they're like, we can't actually come up with a good explanation for this.
And I've said
Fuck it, Android.
And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think there was another obvious route in that season they could have gone down that actually would have still been dramatically satisfying, and that is the Doctor creates a Ganger. And
the Rebel Flesh.
And they did such a good job in the Rebel Flesh of establishing that these Gangers are people.
Yeah.
They exist, they live, they breathe, they die. And if the Doctor had to ask a Ganger to die for him and die for the universe, that would be predictable, but it would have an emotional heft that would go along with the theme of the Doctor being more destructive.
And like that, even though that was also kind of a very obvious avenue, it's like that one works thematically, and like it works into like it makes sense with like what actually happens.
Because then the Doctor really does die.
Like that is an actual, like, I mean, it's a clone thing, but it's like that's the Doctor. It's not a robot.
And to me, the first half of the season feels so constructed around the idea of that's where they were headed. I still wonder to this day if Stephen Moffat saw reaction to that online and changed direction at the last minute, because the first half of Series 6 is constructed to lead you down the path of the Doctor is going to be a ganger.
Yeah.
Those 7 episodes, that is the arc of those 7 is introducing the concept of gangers, the concept of the Doctor dying, and leading us to a point where that's going to happen. And then Let's Kill Hitler introduces the Tesseract and abandons all of the stuff from the first half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little suspicious to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's like, it does kind of feel like maybe like Stephen Moffat was just kind of like prowling the message boards on the internet, and like too many fan theories were too close to what he actually had written, so it's like, oh fuck.
Yeah. Because again, I mean, the Tesseract, it's got one appearance. The gangers are crucial to the plot of 6.1.
Mm-hmm.
So, anywho.
Doctor Who.
Yes. So that brings us to sort of now. That was a long sort of recap of Doctor. But anytime you're going to try to introduce Doctor Who, you have to talk that long about it. It's a 50-year-old series, for God's sake. But now we're entering Series 7, and it's sort of going to be bridging the anniversary year, so they're trying to go all out for it. And I'm really excited for this series because I really like all the things I've heard about it and the directions Moffat wants to take it this year. I think the first thing we should probably talk about is that they are doing sort of this little farewell run for Amy and Rory, and then they're going to introduce a new companion. And Sean, I know you have an opinion on this. You think it's time to do a new companion.
Oh, yes? Yeah, definitely. I mean, they did a lot of really great stuff with Amy and Rory in season 6, but if those episodes that were like really focused on Amy and Rory were not as strong as they were, it's like I was getting really tired of them. Like, I mean, I thought they were great companions, but especially with how it's sort of like the modern show feels, I feel like they just like chew through companions really fast, and that works. Like the Russell T Davies, it's like there was like Rose overstayed her welcome. Like one companion a season actually like works really well. I feel generally with the pacing of the modern show.
Yeah. And that's nothing against these companions or the writing for them.
Yeah, no, I mean I've liked I love Martha, but it's like
that's the role of the companion on Doctor Who.
Is like and just like eventually they sort of get stale. And one thing that Stephen Moffat did really well with his run so far is that he focused really heavily on the companions and made them very interesting. So they didn't really overstay their welcome.
Well, I think definitely you couldn't have done with Amy and Rory the way they were introduced. If you had done a one-and-done season with them, that wouldn't be
I'm not saying that they should have ended after the end of the first, season 5, but it's like, I definitely felt like, kind of like around the halfway point of season 6, before they had, like, The Girl Who Waited and, like, the really strong companion-focused episodes. I was definitely, like, kind of getting some Amy and Rory fatigue.
Yeah. But, and I actually, as for Series 7... I want to pitch this question to you. Do you think it's fair and good and everything to devote a final 5 to sending them off?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, because they've been, especially since they were there for 2 full seasons, that it's like, at this point, it's like, they need to have a strong, like, finishing arc. I mean, but it's like, they definitely need to go at this point, because they developed them so much in season 6. They did so much with them. There's not really a lot of places to go other than sending them off with a last few episodes.
But you agree it would be wrong if they just started a new season and left their arc a little bit unfinished. They need to really... I mean, and I think in some sense their arc is finished. You're right. I agree. Series 6 was so good with them, there's nowhere else you can bring them. Mm-hmm. But you need to spend a little more time just getting them off, because if you just sort of left them on the side, it would not make sense, given how important they are to the Doctor at this moment.
Yeah.
So, and I like that they're limiting it to 5. Like, that seems like a good number of episodes for them. Just have 5 more adventures, and Stephen Moffat has been very clear, 5 is a game-changing, that's it. They're not leaving the door open for them to come back, even. Mm-hmm. So, are you worried or predicting at all that they are going to die? Do you think Stephen Moffat will be that cold-hearted?
I think it's possible. I doubt it. Like, companion death is super rare. Yeah. Like, I mean, Adric is the only one of the 5th Doctor, Adric's the only companion that's actually died. That was really sad. I mean, Adric was not a great companion, But having, like, an actual companion die, I mean, they, like, back in, like, the early 80s, like, that took some balls on Doctor Who to do it back then.
Well, characters on TV itself just did not die back then.
Yeah, especially, like, a main character. And Adric was, like, his character, he was, like, 15 years old. He was, like, this 15-year-old kid on the TARDIS. It's like, Jesus. This is really dark. But yeah, like, companion death, I'm sure there have been some companions that I don't even know exist, because it's like, with the expanded universe material, there's so much Doctor Who that's like, I don't even have, like, means of accessing, like, some companions. It's just like, so there probably have been some companions that have died in, like, radio dramas and stuff like that I haven't listened to. But yeah, the main fiction, like, a companion death would be a huge, huge thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, but since they're devoting those extra 5 episodes, I think it's possible that they might kill off Amy, Rory, or maybe even both of them.
Yeah.
That'd be very depressing if they did.
I do think... here's the thing. I would actually believe that they were going to do both more than they would do one, because I think it would be dramatically troublesome to kill one and then leave the other and never meet them again, because that is one thing that would happen, is if you killed Amy or Rory, their story would naturally continue from there, because they would have a whole new development to get through, which is, I've just lost the most important person I will ever meet.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, what situation would be the absolute most depressing to live now that you've gone down, because I wasn't even really thinking about companion death.
Yeah.
That's like, because it's just that it's so rare that it's only happened once in the main series.
And I don't think they're going to do it, because then that would make it very tough on the new companion, because you ideally want the Doctor and his companion to be having a good, fun time.
Yeah.
You can't, especially with how Matt Smith's Doctor is portrayed, he would not get over that in... probably a couple centuries. I mean, he's probably still not over Adric, for fuck's sake. And
I mean, I'm not over Adric yet, so...
I know, and as you said, Adric was far from the most important companion.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of really annoying bratty kid, but doesn't mean I wanted him to die.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I would like a scenario sort of like where they paused things in Series 6, where they reach a point where they mutually understand that this is not the life they should be leading, and they're able to just go live their lives in peace. I think Amy and Rory have earned that as characters.
Yeah, like...
That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's just like they're really at the point where they've been with the Doctor long enough where it's like the Doctor just needs to let them go at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's what, if those 5 episodes explore that concept of people moving on with their lives, and then the Doctor is going to have to confront that by getting a new companion, that could be really interesting and a good follow-up on what Series 5 and 6 did. And I think that's why, more than anything else, you need 5 more with Amy and Rory before jumping into the new companion, because I think one of the themes of that is Matt Smith's character having to move on, and that's something he's obviously had issues with in the past.
Yeah, I mean, because, like, one of the weird side effects of having Amy and Rory be on the show this much is that Matt Smith's Doctor has not had any new companions.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, Rory kind of became a companion, and then River kind of became a companion, but it's like he's had that same set of people with him for his entire run as the Doctor so far. So it's like that was one of the things that I really was sort of like annoyed about with like them being so reluctant to leave Amy and Rory behind, was that it's like I want to see what they're going to do. It's like I want to see what they would do with a new companion. I want to see how Matt Smith would interact with a new companion.
And that's what makes Series 7 so exciting to me. And luckily Matt Smith's got plenty of time left. He's confirmed he's going to be here, he said, at least through 2014. So he will be 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah.
And that's good. He should be.
Yeah, like especially like because not only did Matt Smith start really strong, but I definitely get the feeling he just keeps on getting better and better.
He does.
He's a Doctor to stay to me.
Yeah. He's definitely one where it's like you talk about feeling a little Amy and Rory fatigue, and I agree. At parts in Series 6 you felt like there were places they could move on without them.
Yeah.
But Matt Smith, it's like not only has he had no fatigue at all, and as an incarnation of the Doctor, it's like you want to see them do more and more and more.
Yeah.
Because Series 6 was basically, you could sum it up as Stephen Moffat and the writers saying, what can we throw at Matt Smith this week that is bigger than what we did last week, and him rising to that challenge every time.
Yeah, it's just like, and I mean, just the fact that I'm so excited to see how Matt Smith's going to interact with the new companion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm really excited about, is to just see what they're going to do with that relationship.
Yeah.
Because I just want to, because Matt Smith is so good as the Doctor.
Yeah. It's going to be great. And so I'm looking forward to the Christmas. I think that's a good thing also, is that they're introducing her in the Christmas special, because that will give the Christmas special purpose again.
Yeah. Do you think the Christmas special is going to really have anything to do with Christmas?
This time, no. Although, who knows? I mean, Stephen Moffat seems to really like linking them together. And Russell T. Davies had no interest in it.
It's just like, And it's just like, it's a convenient time to put out the episode, so we'll have it be snowing in the background.
Right. And I mean, to be fair, the best Christmas special by a country mile is the Christmas Carol.
Oh, yeah.
And that is all about Christmas.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very much a Christmas story. Quick recap, Dr. Witch in the Wardrobe, or whatever the fuck it was called. Dr. Widow in the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
Last year's special.
I only watched it. That's like one of the few episodes of Doctor Who that I've only watched once.
We both were kind of like, good, not great.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily go so far as good most of the time. Like, it's just like, I was so lukewarm about that episode, it's like, I don't know, something about it just seemed really off for a bunch of, like, those side characters.
There were a lot of...
did not care about.
Yeah, I liked the last 5 minutes a lot, where he goes and meets Amy and Rory again, but that kind of underlined to me how it felt like sort of a placeholder. It's like, oh yeah, we have to write this because it's Christmas now.
Yeah.
But you could tell they were like, Stephen Moffat was just waiting to get on. I want to get on to the next part of the story. You know?
Yeah, it's like all like, there's just like the side characters in that episode. It's just like the mom that's just like, that mom just seemed all over the place to me in that episode.
But anyway, so, we're talking about Series 7, and it's sort of interesting. We have this clear sense of arc so far, where 5, first off, and then Amy and Rory are going to leave. We meet the new companion in 6, but then there's 8 more after that we really have no conception of yet. Yeah. And I think that's really fascinating, that we just, it's kind of a mystery what's going to happen. Not only is going to have a new companion, and presumably there's going to be more mythology surrounding her, just as Amy introduced a lot of mythology of her own. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of new directions the show can go, and there's still stuff there Moffat's dealing with from Series 5 and 6.
Yeah.
So that's what makes Series 7 so exciting to me, is it feels like it could go anywhere at this point, and it could address very little of earlier stuff, and I'd be okay with that, because there's still extra years with Smith to get it out of the way, if they want to do it. Or it could be really heavy on sort of tying everything together and sending it off, and I don't know what it's going to be exactly, and that's kind of invigorating, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have more, I just get like the sense that I want a less like plot-focused season this time.
I do too, and Moffat has actually said that himself. He said he did. I think you can tell if you read between some of his words. He took some of the criticisms, which were fairly minor on the whole, to Series 6 to heart, and he said what they're doing with Series 7, and I really like this idea. Is he says no two-parters, and there's going to be some of an overarching arc, but more emotionally and thematically. There's not going to be a big story like Series 6 had, and he said his goal is to make every episode a blockbuster, and make each episode just as good a standalone experience as it can be. And that's an idea I really like.
Yeah, especially, like, the thing with, like, the two-part episodes is, like, it was just kind of a weird thing that they did when they brought back Doctor Who, is that they resurrected the age-old Doctor Who problem of the episodes being too long for the stories. And so, I mean, like, and there have been a few good two-parters. Like, The End of Time, I think, is a pretty solid two-parter. Like, that felt like it should have been two parts, even though the first part wasn't the best. Like, part 2 was a lot better.
I think Stephen Moffat wrote the very first... Oh, he wrote the second two-parter, but it was with Christopher Eccleston, and it was the Dr. Dances one.
Oh, yeah. I forget that one's even a two-parter, because it's such a solid one. But it's like... Yeah. But there are a lot of two-parters that it's just like, it feels way too long. It's not as bad as the old Doctor Who, where it's like, you've got 4 30-minute episodes, where it's like, it's basically a feature-length movie. It's like...
Yeah.
They did not have plots that could meet out a feature-length movie.
And to be fair, the best thing Stephen Moffat's ever written is the two-part finale to Series 5. It's phenomenal, and it could never be told in less than 2 hours.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like the only time, those plot-focused two-parters tend to be a little bit better, because if they're dealing with a big overarching plot of the season, that's I mean, that was some of the problems with Season 6, was that it had some issues dealing with the super constrained plots that kind of needed to be two-parters.
Right, and... So yeah, I did think... So I hope they don't... With getting rid of two-parters, I hope they don't try to do too much in single episodes. But I do kind of like the work ethic they're having, which is, he said he's really just told the writers to set themselves free and just write really good Doctor Who stories.
Yeah.
And I almost think that's inspired by the Doctor's wife. And what Neil Gaiman did is, he has this great writing staff. We've seen people like Chris Chibnall and Mark Gatiss do great work.
Yeah.
Just set them loose. Let them do whatever they want. They're good writers, and they're Doctor Who fans. I believe you can get great stuff out of them if you do that. So,
also, get Nicholas Briggs to write an episode. He's the guy, he does the voice of a lot of monsters, and he wrote some of the best Doctor Who radio plays and audio dramas that
Why has he not written one yet?
I don't know. That's because he does the voice for the monsters on the modern show too. So it's get Nicholas Briggs to write a fucking episode. He's really good.
Yeah. So and series the first 5 episodes are basically just Moffat's inner circle. It's Moffat doing 1 and 5, Chris Chibnall doing 2 and 4, and then I think Mark Gatiss at number 3. So it's like that's going to be really concentrated, I think. So that should be interesting. And you can just tell from the titles of episodes, they've got some big ideas here. There's Asylum of the Daleks is the premiere. There's Dinosaurs on a Spaceship.
Is that the actual title?
Yes, it's Dinosaurs on a Spaceship.
Because I've been trying to avoid spoilers for this season as much as possible. It's kind of like a new thing I've been trying out, because I used to be very much into like trying to consume as much like media as I can about like something I'm really excited about. And it's like now I'm trying to like kind of hold back as much as possible.
Yeah. Sorry about the sirens in the background. Sean and I have stopped several times to get rid of them, but for some reason, sirens are going by our apartment all the damn time now.
It's because this college just started, Jonathan.
That's true. That's not even a joke.
I mean, you didn't live in Farron in the middle of the campus. You have no idea what it's like having sirens go by you every few minutes.
Yes, but no, I understand you're not trying to see too many spoilers.
Yeah, so it's like I haven't looked. So it's like if you might know a lot more about like what's going to go on with the season.
I just know episode titles, and that's not a spoiler. I mean, just the title being that,
Yeah, I mean, I saw the trailer where he said dinosaurs on a spaceship. So. Yeah. I didn't realize that was the actual title of the episode.
That's pretty awesome. Yep. There's going to be, the Western one they're talking about, and it looks like they're trying a lot of different Doctor Who genres, which is something you love to talk about, is that Doctor Who can be anything.
Yes, and it kind of disappoints me that sometimes they don't try to go outside of the box. Although, I say that, and then, like, you saying they're going to be the Western episode reminded me of, like, one of my least favorite Doctor Who episodes ever. Which is, and this is weird, like, from what I've seen online, not a lot of people share this opinion with me, but there's this old William Hartnell, like, the first Doctor. It's just super old episode. I think it's called The Gunslingers, something like that, some, like, really cliche sort of, like, Western title. And it's, like, the Doctor in, like, the Tombstone, like, OK Corral shootings. And that's, like, a thing that I'm kind of, like, I've seen a lot of, like, the Tombstone movies and, like, the documentaries and stuff. This is just kind of, like, a little, like, event that I was kind of interested in. So it's something that I know a bit about, and it's, like, just seeing the episode, and it's, like, just, like this very sort of, like, American, like, real-life Western tale being told through a, like, quirky British sci-fi show in, like, 1965. Just, like, they got everything wrong. Like, every sort of, like, factual inaccuracy. Like, I mean, they got the people wrong. Like half the people that are involved in the actual incident weren't even mentioned. Like, they didn't even... Like, the McClowry family just didn't even exist. It was just, like... It was incredible how inaccurate it was. Well... I'm not saying, like, Doctor Who needs super historical accuracy, but...
Well, what I was going to say is that we know a lot more about the Old West now than we did in 1963. No one knew jack shit if you watch, like, some old Westerns. Like,
yeah, but it's like, I mean, the Doctor Who episode, it was to a completely different level.
But, I mean, they made really effective use of American landscape last season on Doctor Who in the premiere.
Yeah.
And the space program and all that. And I guess they're doing this because they liked that so much. They shot in America again, I guess, for this.
So, that's cool. Hopefully it will not be as bad as that one.
Yes. So, anywho... So it just sounds like the first 5 are going to be really fun, and I hope the next ones are too. And I'm excited to see the new companion. I heard who was cast, and I've seen a picture of her, but you really have no sense of what direction they're going in. I know, Sean, you were a little disappointed, and you can't really judge anything yet. Mm-hmm. But you were a little disappointed that it was another sort of young woman of that age,
like
again.
Contemporary young British female.
Yeah.
It's just like it's something that I want the new series to get more. Just, like, explore more avenues with the companions, because I feel like fans of the show, like you've had the modern series going on long enough that fans of, like, the modern series, just the modern series, can go ahead and have a companion that's not 100% audience proxy. Like, have a companion that's an alien or something like that. Like, just, like, go outside the box a little bit, because that's even something that, like, classic Doctor Who, like, had more because they had a lot more companions just, like, choose from. But it's just like something that's like I really wish they would just kind of like look outside the box, because I don't necessarily want another 20-something contemporary time British female. Like at least like maybe like she's from the future, like Zoe, or maybe she's like from the past. Yeah. Like it can still be a human person, but it's like you've got all of time and space to pick from.
And in all fairness, she could be. We don't know that yet.
Yeah, it's like, but at least I just kind of get the impression that she's most likely not.
Yeah, but I mean, I think they haven't released a production picture of her yet. They just had a picture of her and Matt Smith on set hanging out. Who knows if that's her actual costume she's in, Mm-hmm. So, we'll see. I suspect with Stephen Moffat, it will definitely be something where it will be introduced as simple and will be anything but once you learn more about it.
And then she'll be an android the entire time.
Yes. But I mean, Amy very much fits that model of, young contemporary British female, but she's so different when you think of her as she functions because he did so many clever things with that character and that relationship.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, the best other companions have been young contemporary 20-something British females like Ace and Sarah Jane, but it's just
you could go outside the box.
Every once in a while we just kind of need to explore. I mean, it's just one of the really fun things about the kind of crazy expanded universe stuff. Is there's a dog, the Doctor's had a T-Rex as a companion. He's had Frobisher, a shape-shifting penguin. He's a shapeshifter, but he just chooses to be a penguin because he likes how penguins look.
They need to resurrect that character with modern CGI.
And he's like a private eye detective too. Frobisher is one of the greatest. I think he originated in the comic books. He's in a few of the audio dramas, and they're he's with Colin Baker in the audio dramas, and they're some of the best ones out there because he's just such a fascinating character. He's just so completely insane, just the concept of it.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, hopefully, maybe this girl is actually Frobisher. She'll be a girl for the first 10 minutes. And
that would be the most obscure reference. It's just bring back Frobisher. I would love it. I would eat that up.
Yep.
Stephen Moffat, I hope you're listening.
So, what are some other things you'd like to see them do in Series 7, or things you're anticipating?
I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely curious about because it's the first episode of the Asylum of the Daleks, right?
Yes.
So they're starting right off with a Dalek episode, which they thankfully left out of season 6 was the big Dalek episode because that's one area where they had a lot of fatigue in the new series where they used the Daleks way too much. So I'm curious about from what I saw in the trailer because the trailer was mostly felt focused on that episode.
Yeah,
that it looked really interesting, and I kind of
Well, and
how it looked.
And people kind of forget this, but Stephen Moffat's been with the series so long, people forget he's never written a Dalek episode. He just hasn't done it. It's one of the few things he hasn't done on the show yet, and I'm really interested in seeing how Stephen Moffat does Daleks. I'm wondering if we could get a Blink level reinterpretation of what they are. I think he.
I don't necessarily. I'm not looking for a reinterpretation of.
I'm not meaning reinterpretation, but I mean bring them back to sort of their roots where they are scary.
Crazy spider android Daleks.
No, but I just mean do it in such a way where the Daleks were kind of caricatures of themselves in the middle of sort of the new modern series.
Yeah,
and parts of the old series too.
That's the progression of the Dalek is that it starts out every sort of new incarnation of the Dalek, every new kind of approach to it. They start out really scary and intimidating, and just weirdly, really good, compelling sci-fi villains. If you just look at how the Dalek looks without any sort of context and not having seen it in the story, the character design looks fucking stupid.
Yeah,
but somehow in the stories, it works fucking phenomenally.
Yes,
so the Dalek stories are some of the best stories out there. But then eventually they get overused, overdone, they get kind of played out. I mean, especially in the old series, with Davros, after Genesis of the Daleks, it's you had fucking Davros episodes all the time, and it's if you don't need, Davros does not need to keep on coming back for every single episode and dying.
Every single Russell T Davies finale was about Daleks.
And then, with the new series, one of the best Daleks episodes ever is the Dalek episode in season 1 of the new series. And then
it's just one Dalek.
And they just make it fucking scary as hell. They really make it intimidating.
And that's what I'd like to see Stephen Moffat do with them. Again, not a reinterpretation, but a way to bring them back to their roots as scary villains. We, on our old Doctor Who podcast from last year, discussed the William Hartnell episode where the Daleks were introduced.
Yeah.
And, it's from the 60s, the effects aren't that good, but I do think they're intimidating villains then.
Yeah.
And that's one of the strengths of that episode.
That is the strength of that episode. Because that serial is really plagued by that problem of being way too long for the actual plot that it has. But when the Daleks are on screen, it's that's what makes that serial really good.
The introduction of the first Dalek is one of the most iconic shots in the series' history.
Yeah, where Barbara's up against the wall and you kind of see it through the point of view of the eye.
Yeah,
yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yep. So I hope we get to see something like that. And, they have screened Asylum of the Daleks for critics. I've only read Den of Geek's spoiler-free review, because Den of Geek, if you don't know, is a British website that I don't love their stuff, but for Doctor Who, they do really good coverage, because when they review an episode, they're very stringent about being spoiler-free, and when they say spoiler-free, they mean it. and I really like that. You don't learn anything about the episode. They just give you a general impression, which is that, it's about Daleks. It's a Stephen Moffat episode.
About Asylum.
And he, makes really good use of them. That's what they just said it's a really, really good premiere. So, I'm excited.
And then they've basically ditched the, candy-colored, crazy, Power Ranger design from the very unfortunate redesign of the Daleks from
Victory of the Daleks?
Yeah. It's that episode wasn't terrible, but that redesign of the Daleks I was not a fan of.
No,
they were very aesthetically.
I actually thought as Dalek that was my favorite Dalek episode behind the Robert Shearman one from season 1.
Well, it was a fun episode, especially with the jet fighters in space and stuff.
Yeah. But no, the candy colored that didn't make sense.
Yeah, the Power Ranger Daleks, where it's and they just had this weird. It was almost like a hump on the back, where it's the Daleks have this really nice 60s ergonomic design, and it's they just put this really disgusting hump back on the Daleks.
Well, and I've always thought Victory of the Daleks was, and I'm sure this is true, BBC, has hired Stephen Moffat, he's doing it, he's just started, and they say, you need to do a Dalek episode because it's our strongest merchandising thing, which it is, and that's why they do it so often, is because it sells toys and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he was told, and he just didn't have the clout at the time to refuse it, that he had to do a Dalek episode. And then he built up some clout and was for Series 6, no, I really don't want to do it. And I think what makes me excited about Asylum with the Daleks is it feels like now he's finally ready and he's reached a point in his interpretation of the story that he wants to do it. And that seems like a much better reason to do it than what Victory of the Daleks was.
Yeah, but to me, Victory of the Daleks did still kind of feel like they were trying to... It was because it was just part of that thing where they had this very new direction that the series is going in. And they kind of wanted to throw their hat in. It's this is what the Daleks are like. And it's they had the redesign. They made them really big. They sort of changed their voices. They made these individual Daleks that are very iconic looking. I kind of like that idea of having. I mean, they kind of did something similar with the Cult of Skaro in the Russell T Davies era, where it's they have these individual Daleks that you can kind of recognize and see. It's that's the Red Ranger Dalek, and that's the Yellow Ranger Dalek. But the overall idea just really did pan out.
However, if they spin them off into a Power Rangers Dalek crossover spin-off series, I would watch the fuck out of that.
Oh, totally. I mean, I just if someone just on the internet takes some old Mighty Morphin Power Rangers episodes and just sort of green screens in one of those Dalek candy colored Dalek toys over the Megazord. Have it fight a giant putty man, I'm totally for that. Someone get on that on the internet.
I'm fairly sure that was the nerdiest sentence ever constructed.
What? I have said nerdier. I have said far more nerdy things in my life. That might not even be the nerdiest thing I said all day.
That's probably true. Anyway, so okay. Anything else from Series 7 we want to talk about?
I think we pretty much covered sort of our hopes and our dreams for the series.
Yes, I'm very excited to see how it's going. I think, we talked about this last year, that Series 6, one of the other things that plagued it a little bit is the structure where BBC decides, all right, we're going to air it in 2 chunks. And that's another thing where I feel like Stephen Moffat had a different idea for how the series would progress that was hampered by that structure. I feel like Series 6 would have looked different if his original plan to just do a 13-episode season had been sort of left intact. Because... while I think the first 7 are a really good, just 7-episode unit, and the back 6 are 6 really good episodes, they don't congeal perfectly because 7 builds to this massive climax and this massive cliffhanger that you think the show's going to come back different because we've done a game changer here, and it comes back 10 seconds later. Yeah,
it's just in the huge cliffhanger is completely pointless. It's the episode. It's Good Man Goes to War ends with the Doctor leaving. Let's Kill Hitler begins with the Doctor coming back, having done absolutely nothing.
Yes, and I still favor the theory that he actually didn't go anywhere. He just went to that field, was his first stop.
He's just fuck it.
He's he goes in and he's all right, off to find Amy's child. I'm lonely. But I would like to see a Series 7 episode that explores the inside of the TARDIS again. I'd like to see that in the future because
that's another thing that's because that's
Doctor's Wife did it.
Yeah, Doctor's Wife did it a little bit. They were going to if you see some interviews with Neil Gaiman where he talked about that episode, that's one of the things where he apparently it's I really wish that we lived in a world where it's we could have the what sounds like a 90-minute long episode that the Doctor's Wife was going to be based on the script that he wrote that obviously had to be cut down way over budget, just way too long, and they couldn't do nearly everything that they wanted to. But it's it would be amazing to live in the world where that episode somehow got made 90 minutes.
Write it as a novelization.
I mean that's what he said. That it's he's open to that idea of doing that in the future. So I hope he does because I'd
buy it day one. Yeah. I'd buy 10 copies.
Yeah, but that's something that they did a little bit in The Doctor's Wife, where they they built those hallway sets. Hopefully, they didn't tear them down and kept them somewhere because they were cool looking. And this is something that the older series definitely did. Eventually, made the TARDIS its sort of own thing. It had a lot of different rooms, a lot of different sets. Some of them, in some of the Tom Baker episodes, I think it's Invasion of Time, where they go running through some Sontarans get into the TARDIS, and they're running through it, and they it is so obvious that they had no more budget to make TARDIS looking sets, so they just run through what looks like similar to a warehouse building with this little concrete ramp, and they just run through that 3 different times, almost like a Scooby-Doo thing. It's really ridiculous. Hopefully they can do something like that. Find that warehouse with that concrete ramp and do that again, because that was great.
I mean, I do think they've gotten a lot of good comedic mileage out of implying things about the TARDIS we don't see. But it's been 7 years now. We can...
Yeah, we should explore the interior of this TARDIS a little bit more.
Does it feel weird to you that we are entering the 7th year of Modern Who? It's not new anymore.
Yeah, it's not new Who. It's kind of like with DC's relaunch, where it's the New 52. It has been going on for a year. It's how long are we going to call that the New 52?
Right.
How long is this going to be New Who?
Yeah. We're at a point where it's actually probably easier just to consider these seasons 30, 1, 2, and 3.
Eventually it's going to get to that point where it's just do you call it season 20 or season 50? I don't fucking know. Yeah. And season 7 seasons is a big number, and we don't consider it all that much in Doctor Who time because it just doesn't feel like it's been around that long, the modern one. But, that's how long all the Star Trek spin-offs ran for. It's how long Buffy ran for. It's longer than most cable dramas have ever run for. That's a long time for a show. And even though they're 13-episode seasons, that's a long time. And it's definitely interesting to me. But it's still just a fraction of a time given the historical run of the show. And then plus it's 7 seasons, but then they also had the special, the specials year, which
we didn't even talk about that
season.
Yeah. So anyway, here's a question I want to ask you. This is not related to Series 7 because I think it's a long time down the road. We know, one day Matt Smith's going to leave, and one day Stephen Moffat's going to leave, and they're both said they love the show so much they have no interest in leaving in the near future. But we know someday there's going to be a turnover.
Yeah.
Are there any writers on the current staff that you would like to see take over? Because Stephen Moffat just was hired up from the ranks. He was a writer for the first 4 seasons, and he comes up. Do you think there's a writer like that now who you would like to see?
My dream obviously is Neil Gaiman. He's I don't think it would happen just because he seems like he's such a prolific writer. He does so much right now. Yeah. It's I don't know if he would want to be tied down to a TV show, but if he does,
give him the job.
Yes, it's fucking fantastic, because that I would love to see what Neil Gaiman would do if he had a run of a whole season of Doctor Who. I think that
even if it was just 1 year.
Yeah, just if he had just 1 year to do a season of Doctor Who, I think that would be absolutely incredible. But Mark Gatiss always he always has really solid episodes. I think he always I always feel whenever a Mark Gatiss episode comes out, it's he feels like he understands. It's not as phenomenal as some of the old Stephen Moffat episodes were in the Russell T Davies years, but it's he's got a solid understanding of what makes the Doctor Who Doctor Who.
Right. And I think the other obvious one is Chris Chibnall, who's on the current staff, and he's done a lot of good stuff, and I guess he's getting a lot more work to do this year, and that's fueled some rumors about whether or not he may take a bigger role on the show in the future. I don't know. I know who are some of the other big writers. I'm kind of looking. I think definitely, Mark Gatiss and Chris Chibnall are the main two, but Toby Whitehouse has done a few in the last couple of years that were good. He did The God Complex, and I forget what he did in Season 5. But they've had actually a lot of writer turnover on the staff in these last couple of years. It's definitely been Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss as the Rocks, and other people sort of coming in and out.
Yeah, which is, I kind of feel like that's how Doctor Who should be. It's just it's got that ability to tell any story that any writer wants to tell.
Just make it a revolving door.
Yeah, just it's obviously you want to have sort of a stable team of writers, writing some of the core episodes. But yeah, definitely have people like Neil Gaiman come in and write an episode every now and then.
Yeah. So it is sort of an interesting time to be a Doctor Who fan and consider these things, because the transitions so far have felt so natural. It's well, of course Stephen Moffat was going to take over after Davies, and it was just a very natural progression, and now it's much more questionable, although I think we're still many years off from having to worry about that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when, what's going to happen when Stephen Moffat, like he's just like you always have to consider it's possible that Doctor Who could get canceled again. Like if Stephen Moffat decides to leave the show and they can't find someone else, or it's like,
well, I mean,
heaven forbid there should exist a world where there's no new Doctor Who TV shows being made.
That's something to consider now that we are entering year 7, which is a big year.
I mean, that's like you said, you don't really think about it because it's Doctor Who, but that's a long time for a TV show to be running.
And if you consider this its own entity, a lot of shows, this is where they would start to wind down. Now, Doctor Who is an institution in England. And this is
Doctor Who does not wind down.
No.
Like, it can reinvent itself.
This is something you must understand if you're an American fan of the show. I actually think, in the scripted dramatic world, we have no equivalent of Doctor Who in America right now. We may have several decades ago, but now shows are so much more narrowcast in the United States, which is a good thing for a lot of shows dramatically, but it means we don't have that show that's watched by a massive percentage of our nation. Maybe American Idol, but that doesn't count because it's not scripted. Doctor Who is watched by a massive percentage of the British population. I mean, it's got like 9 million viewers a week. We may think that's small in America, but proportional to the British size of their country, 9 million is massive. That's incredible. Yeah. And to be watching Doctor Who every week and the audience it gets, it really is an institution at this point, and it's done pretty damn consistently since Russell T Davies brought it back. And it's gotten even bigger, as I understand it, since Steve Moffat
especially if you take into account all the BBC iPlayer and those statistics too. It's constantly topping iTunes and stuff like that.
Yeah. And now it's setting records in BBC America. All its international distribution is doing so well. It's going to be around for a long time, but we do have to think about the fact that it's now sort of becoming what the original series was at a point, which is just this long-running sci-fi franchise. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the show evolves to sustain itself.
Yeah, to see if they can pull off another Stephen Moffat renewal of the show.
And, I mean, obviously, the original series ran into roadblocks at certain points when it had to do replacements, and that's part of what broke it down in the end.
Well, that, and then, the BBC, Michael Gray, the head of the BBC at the time, just basically tried to kill the show.
Yeah.
It's like I said, there's so many factors into that Grant Baker era that's so really interesting to look into.
Yeah.
It's but if we get another Michael Gray, it could happen.
Yes.
If someone at the BBC just goes insane and decides to kill one of their most successful sci-fi shows, it could happen.
But it's interesting to consider, and it's a good time to be a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, I think so.
Probably the best time ever because you have a giant back catalog to watch, and now with the internet you can see it easier than ever.
Yep.
And you've got great new episodes coming. So, yay.
Then you've got access to, one of the coolest things about being a Doctor Who fan with, the access to the internet is you can get, a lot of those sort of, fan recreations of the older episodes that sadly are lost. There's no other way to get them other than, the audio recordings of people at home.
I still want to see the damn, meta episode where the Doctor has to go back in time and stop the BBC from wiping Doctor Who.
Yeah, I don't know, that'd just be a really depressing episode because the Doctor wouldn't win.
I know. That would be like the Doctor going back to World War II or something.
Yeah, it's just where he tries to kill Hitler. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that happened.
Yeah,
See, I forget because the title of Let's Kill Hitler is so nonsensical.
Yeah, I hate. We talked about this when we did the season 6 podcast. I hate that title so much.
They may as well have called it Fluffy Pink Bunny Rabbits, the movie.
Yeah, I mean that has as much relationship
to
what goes on in the episode as Let's Kill Hitler.
Yeah.
Well, as long as one of the characters says, Fluffy Bunny Rabbit movie.
They could. I mean, it would make in that moment, it would make as much sense. She's I want to go back in time. Why? Fluffy Pink Bunny Rabbits.
Fluffy Pink Bunny Rabbit, the movie.
Yeah.
Bam! Cut the title.
Well, anyway. That's Doctor Who Series 7 preview thingy.
Yes, our hopes, our dreams, possible misgivings.
Yes. So we are excited to talk about this season. We will be back in your ears.
Don't say it like that. Don't say it in your ears.
Okay.
That sounds really creepy.
Episode airs Saturday. The current plan, I guess, is to have the podcast continuing to air on Wednesdays. We may move it up a day or two to talk about the episode, closer to when it airs. I don't know. We will talk about that.
Okay, sure. I mean,
we'll see. It's much easier now. Why Sean and I been doing it on Wednesdays is it's just a good, flexible day for our schedules. But now, we're rooming together for college. It's much easier to record.
Yes, so we could do a podcast every day on Doctor Who if we wanted to.
we really
seriously, we could.